After a lot of time playing around with the Distress Watercolor Pencils, I have found out that they are not just for coloring. I mean, yes, you can certainly color all the things with them, but that is not all you can do with them. And today I'm going to share a quick video showing how you can use them to create a background. When creating an inky background, one of my go-to techniques has always been the old ink smush. You smush the ink pad onto your craft mat, spritz it with a bit of water, and then smush your paper into the ink. Dry it with a heat tool and repeat as desired. Most recently, I came across Tiffany Solario doing this with the Distress spray stains and sharing how this is a way to use spray stains with a bit more control, rather than spraying directly onto your paper. I have since tried it and would definitely agree that you have way more control as compared to just spraying them directly onto the paper, which has made me much more likely to pull them out to create backgrounds in the future. This did get me to thinking, though, about how to use the new watercolor pencils, and that is what I want to share with you today. Would you like even more control of your ink on your backgrounds? Are sprays still too scary for you? Well, if you answered yes to either or maybe both of these questions, then the watercolor pencils may be the answer. To get started, I've used the largest tag die from the Stacked Tags Thinlits and die cut a piece of Distress watercolor paper. I then began creating my background. I'm going to share both how to add ink with the ink smushing and the watercolor pencils so you can see for yourself how you can have a bit more control when inking your backgrounds. I'll be sharing the watercolor pencils a bit later, so just hang with me for a few. Here I'm spraying some frayed burlap distress spray onto my craft mat and spritzing it with some water. I've then mixed it together with my finger, you can certainly use a brush, smushed my paper into the ink, added a bit more water, and then dried it with my heat tool. By doing this and not spraying direct to paper, I was able to have some areas that had little to no ink on them, which I really like because it gives a bit of contrast. Next, I used a happy birthday from the bold text set 1 Thinlits and die cut it from the bottom part of the tag. I kept the negative bits for later so I could use them to fill in the inside of the letters. The actual letters could also be used on another project. And that tray they are in is actually a lid from the scrapbook.com storage bin, one of my favorite organizational pieces. Next, I'm going to add some stamping. This could be done later, but I chose to do it at this point. Here I'm stamping the map image from the Air Travel stamp set in ground espresso archival ink. I knew I'd be adding some water later, and I didn't want this image to lose any detail. And because archival ink is permanent, that makes it a great choice. Now I'm stamping an image from the eccentric stamp set using Distress Oxide inks and frayed burlap, and after stamping them, I rubbed over them with a paper towel to smudge the ink. I then took some of the images from the eccentric and correspondent stamp sets and stamped them using the ground espresso archival ink. With all of the stamping completed, I moved on to the reason you're here, the Distress Watercolor Pencils. It is seriously so easy to add color to create what looks like an ink smushed background. To do this, take your watercolor pencil and a water brush or a paintbrush and pick up some of the ink from the pencil with the wet brush. You could also use a regular paintbrush with water. Then just add the color where you want it. Because these are so pigmented, the color will be bold, especially with darker colors like prize ribbon. To lighten it, you will see me dabbing off my brush onto a paper towel. Here you can see me adding color here and there onto the background and drawing each section as I move along. After doing this, I kind of wish I had done the entire inked background this way, and I'm pretty sure I will be doing that the next time. And remember, if you want the color lighter, add more water and even dab off some of the ink. And if you want more color, just add more color and less water. Next, I'm going to add some splatters using the pencils. Here I'm picking up some color with my water brush and then applying it to my craft mat. I then added a little more water and used a longer brush to pick up the ink and splatter it onto my background. So another thing I'm really loving about these is not wasting so much ink. These are all techniques I used to do with ink pads, and I always felt like I was wasting so much ink. By using the pencils, I hardly waste any at all. Now I'm going to share how I'm using the colors. Now I'm going to share how I'm using the pencils to color. This is like the obvious way to use them, of course. And in a previous video, I applied the color directly onto the paper. But here I'm going to pick up the pigment from the pencil using my water brush. This is just another way to use them to color. Before I begin coloring, I'm going to stamp some images from the Dapper stamp set with black soot archival ink onto a piece of Distress watercolor paper. To color them, I'm pulling the color from the pencil using my water brush. When I move to a new color, I use my heat tool to dry the ink and paper so that I avoid any mixing of color. I seriously love that I can color in such small areas, not waste any ink, and everything matches since it's all part of the Distress palette. You might have noticed that I left the paper in my stamping tool. This was on purpose. I have found that if I stamp, then watercolor, some of the stamped details get lightened by the pigment. So after I finish watercoloring, I'm going to re-ink the images and stamp them again to add the detail back to the image. After I finished the watercoloring, I used a pair of scissors to fussy cut the images. Here I'm adhering an ideology gauge dial and the fussy cut images. I also added a piece of mummy cloth, colored with prize ribbon distress spray stain, and some machine stitching around the outer edge of the tag. I then adhered the tag to a piece of the Distress Halloween black wood grain cardstock and then onto a piece of black craft stock. Once it was assembled, the finished card ended up being 3.5 by 6 3/4 inches. I hope you enjoyed this video sharing some fun ways I'm using the new Distress watercolor pencils. Have you tried them out yet? I can't wait to continue exploring all the possibilities for creating with them. Thanks so much for watching. I'm truly grateful for you. I was wondering if you could do me a quick favor and subscribe to my channel or leave me a thumbs up or a comment. If you're feeling extra generous, I'd love for you to share about my channel with your friends. All of these things help out us YouTubers so much, and it would mean so much to me to have your support.